just out here scheming through the night, yeah. Counting up, dog, we gon' be alright.
Hey guys, hey, it's Rachel, and today I'm here to share my very first story time on this channel. It's going to be my paranormal activity type of experience. It's the only one that's ever happened to me. Thank goodness I couldn't handle more than one. Now, this story takes place 8 years ago, and I did share it on my main channel. So if you've been watching for a very long time, you've probably already heard this story, but I thought to go ahead and redo it since it's been a while, and plus it's Halloween time. So let's go ahead and get right on in. So this story actually takes place 8 years ago. I just moved out of my parents' house. I was going to college, and my grandparents lived about 2-3 hours away, close to the school that I wanted to go to. So I figured to move in with them. Now, the house that I moved into was an older home. It was built maybe 80s, 90s, and so it did have some history. Didn't care to know the history until after everything happened, but the house definitely has some history. And so my grandparents, they lived pretty much downstairs only. It was a 2-story home, 4 bedrooms, and the master was downstairs, so they never came upstairs. Rarely did they come upstairs. And so it was kind of like an apartment to myself up there, and I chose the room closest to the bathroom, which was like super far from the staircase, and so I was isolated. Okay, when I first moved in, the first 4 nights I've already was experiencing things. Okay, so I move in. Like I said, I chose the room closest to the stairs or farthest from the stairs because it was closest to the bathroom. And I was sleeping, and the first night I heard knocking. It was around maybe 4 or 5 a.m. I started to hear this really, really loud knock. I yelled, "Come in," assuming it's my grandparents. No one came in. I dozed back off. Following day, morning to be exact, I asked my grandparents, "Hey, did you come upstairs?" I said, "Come in," and my grandma's looking at me like I'm crazy. She says, "Nobody came upstairs. We never go upstairs." So I'm like, okay, got that in mind. Following night, same thing happens again. I start to hear knocking around like between the hours of 3 a.m., 5 a.m. I would hear this knocking. I opened the door this time, nobody there. Okay, fine. I doze back off. I tell my grandparents the following morning. Again, I hear this knocking, and it always happens between like 3 and 5. And my grandma says, "Oh, well, it's an older home. You know, you'll probably hear little knocks and, creaks and this and that." And so, not really thinking too much into it. When it happened the third night, I kind of just ignored it. Now, fourth night, my parents come to visit me to help me kind of set up and move in and get prepared for school. And I'm over here telling them about this experience of the knocking, and they're telling me the same thing my grandparents told me. It's an older home, so you're gonna hear creaks, you're gonna hear this, you're gonna hear that, you're gonna hear the third, and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I'm not thinking much of it. So it happened the fourth night, but this time I actually did get frightened because it was louder than the first time that I heard the knocks. And so I'm like, yo, this is really crazy. Like, I'm hearing this knocking, and it was always between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. I'd hear this knocking. And then every time I opened the door, there'd be no one outside of the door, but it would just be this loud, this loud knock that would wake me up. Okay, so okay, whatever, not thinking too much of it. I'm thinking, okay, this is an older home, maybe it just happens at these specific hours because that's just what it does. All right, so come the fifth night, I'm on the phone with my friend, and we're just talking. I should also mention that upstairs we barely had any furniture because, like I said, we just moved in, and my grandparents, they literally lived downstairs and never went upstairs, so there was like barely any furniture up there. So I say all that to say that my mom, stepdad, and brother, they were sleeping all downstairs where the furniture was at in the living room and having a good time. And so we ended up staying up really, really late. My parents didn't end up going to bed until maybe like 2 a.m. I was on the phone with my friend, and we didn't get off the phone until maybe like 4:30 in the morning, right? And so I'm in the room talking to her, and I start to hear the knocking yet again. And at this point, I'm not terrified because the lights are on, the TV's on, I'm on the phone, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's just like, the house is old, okay, whatever. I go into the bathroom, right? And like I said, no one is upstairs. No one comes upstairs. I have to keep stressing that because I literally lived up there by myself, okay? So I use the bathroom with the door open because there's nobody coming upstairs. And then plus at this point it's like 3:30 a.m. and my parents are sleeping. Everybody's sleeping in the house. And so I'm just talking and I'm laughing, and next thing you know, I hear what sounds like somebody going 100 miles per hour on the staircase. Boom, 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 boom. And I immediately close the door thinking, okay, maybe it's my stepdad. I know my mom, she doesn't run upstairs. My little brother, he was way too young to run up the stairs. My grandparents, they never even come upstairs. So I was like, it has to be my stepdad just like running up the stairs for some odd reason. I hurried up and closed the door, and I'm still laughing with her, and I don't hear anything. Like, it just goes silent, and I'm like, this is so odd. Like, somebody just ran up the stairs, and and it's kind of freaked me out a little bit. And so I stayed in the bathroom. I literally stayed in the bathroom. I did not leave that bathroom until maybe 7 a.m. Honestly, I pretty much fell asleep in the bathroom. So I was so terrified to open up the door, and just, I mean, I was just scared, you know? So I finally leave the bathroom at like 7 a.m. when it was daytime. I run downstairs, wake up my mom. I'm telling her everything that happened. And my mom looks at me a little concerned, and she's like, you know, well, we didn't want to frighten you, but right before you moved in, you know, there was a lady that lived here, and she did pass away in a room that you chose. And I'm like, what? You know? And so my mom's like, yeah, you know, but she was a really nice lady. So, I mean, we didn't want to tell you. We didn't want to frighten you because we know how you think and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so long story short, there was a woman that lived in the house before my grandparents and I moved in, right? There was like a whole family, and the woman in the room, I think she was ill. I don't really know her story. I didn't want to get too into it because I started to get freaked out. But long story short, she did die in the room, and I think she wasn't discovered for like a few days. I want to say like a few days. When we moved in the home, or I should say when my grandparents moved in, like her stuff was still there. I mean, it was just all still there. I mean, like she was still there, kind of. I don't know. It was like really, really weird. So it just so happens that I'm gonna go ahead and chop it up to it being her energy, being in that room, and the knocking and the running, and it really freaked me out. What ended up happening was I did switch rooms. I started to sleep closer to the staircase, and I closed that door that she passed in, and I never opened it again. I never heard any more knocking from that point on, from switching my room. But I will tell you this, my stepdad's brother, okay, my stepdad's brother came to the home to visit one time. It was like this big family, just kind of reunion happening. And the following day, he was like, yo, I heard these crazy noises. And he ended up sleeping in that room. He's like, I kept hearing these like crazy noises. Have you ever experienced like these crazy noises? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I did hear knocking, and I heard this, and like a lady passed away, but they said she was nice and that she was just ill, you know, she was just passed away from being ill. And he's like, okay, well, thanks for letting me know in advance. And he ended up, him and his dad ended up sleeping in the loft because they were so paranoid, because both of them kept hearing noises in that same room. So I don't know what to say about that, or if you even believe in that. It could have just all been a crazy coincidence, right? But for the most part, that door was always closed. But anytime someone did stay overnight and ended up sleeping in that room, if they didn't believe in it, they would hear stuff. So that was the only experience that I had, thank goodness. I honestly do not think I could handle more like scary experiences. I'm not equipped for scary stuff like that, like okay. But let me know if you've ever had a paranormal type of experience like that. Like I said, it was only in that room. It's the craziest thing. It was only in that room that I experienced those things. So for 5 days I experienced crazy stuff. And then like I said, my stepdad's brother stayed in the room with his dad, so my step grandpa, and they heard crazy stuff in that room too. And then EJ, he actually slept in that room because he wanted to test out the theory. He said he heard a faint knock, but he tuned it out and kept sleeping. So I mean, we all heard stuff in that same room. But that was my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and until next time, Happy Halloween.